We're going to talk today about the First Amendment. Because the First Amendment, most people think, is just kind of a grab bag of leftover things that they didn't know where to put in the Constitution, so they just sort of threw them together and said, well, these all belong here. We can do all these things. And there's a little freedom of the press, and there's a little freedom of speech, and there's a little of this, and there's a little freedom of religion, and then a little of that, and so on. But actually what the First Amendment is, has a very specific purpose. And it's been described by constitutional lawyers as a river of rights that lead up to an end product, which when we get to the end of it, you'll go, oh, of course, that's what it's about. And the first right is, well, I'll just start reading. Congress shall make no law. Now, first what that tells us is that this is a law, that this amendment has to do with Congress, which up until the 14th Amendment meant it was just the national Congress. It didn't have anything to do with states. But the national government was insisted would not be allowed to do certain things. With the 14th Amendment, it means that the states can't do them either. And it says Congress shall make no law. The reason that law is important in there is because this is a government. The Constitution has set up a government, and that government is a government based on law rather than based on the whim of men, or the whims of even you ladies. We'd love to, we who are married, love to be governed by your whims. But the whims of men in government is not a good idea, so this government was going to be run by law. So they said, okay, if we have a government of law, we're going to restrict it, and Congress shall make no law regarding, first of all, respecting an establishment of religion. Now this is important because it actually comes from the observation that I cannot force you to believe anything. I can perhaps hold a bayonet to your neck and get you to say that blue is yellow. But inside you know that blue is not yellow. And if you ever get a chance, if I'm turned around to drop my guard, you're going to try to beat the blue right out of me. So we have that observation that you cannot force anyone to believe something. And since government is basically force, it's got the bayonets, it's got the guns, then the only way, if a government attempted to establish a religion to say blue is yellow and this is what everyone shall believe, then the only way that it can do that is with force. And since you can't do that, why even try? You know, so they said, first of all, we will not have any establishment of religion. The second thing is, it says, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And the reason that they have added in prohibiting the free exercise thereof is because they had, if, for instance, I were to, you believe that blue is not yellow, but I want you to believe only in yellow. I would say, you can't put blue up anywhere in your house. It's a law. You can't do that. We'll come and take you away. You can't paint anything blue. You can't even look at anything blue. This shirt would send me to jail. And so if you did that, then pretty soon there's no blue around. All there is yellow. What you've done then is you have then, in effect, established the religion of yellow, but not really establishing it, just it became that way because there's no blue around. But we all know blue is not yellow. So Congress shall make a law establishing the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, because that's just a covert way of establishing religion. And, oh, also, you may not know, or you may know that the old Constitution of the Soviet Union, Article 42, said you can be any religion you like. You can be Roman Catholic, you can be Russian Orthodox, you can be Baptist, you can be whatever you like. But you can't practice it. You can't do any Bible studies. You can't talk to anybody about it. And this is where it really comes in, is the next one, because they are going to abridge the freedom of speech, because you can't talk about that. The only religion that you are allowed to espouse is Marxism. And that's another way then. You have this one right, don't want to establish, you're not going to establish a religion. You can believe whatever you want, but then also you have to be able to exercise it. You have to be able to paint your walls blue if you want. And you have to be able to tell other people about it. Because if you can't tell other people about it, that goes away. You end up having only the religion of the blues, or the yellows, or whatever it was. Yes, Steve?
I want to, in light of recent current events, I had some questions about the Supreme Court's rulings this week, especially with gay marriage. And I had a thought about it, in that if they grant special rights or privileges to any particular group, they're actually taking away, in a sense, the free speech of anybody else who might oppose that for whatever reason, be it they're religious or whatever. I mean, you wouldn't, in other words, the government force would be behind that decision, and is behind that decision.
Yeah.
What do you think, Richard?
Yeah, it's been discussed. I was reading some things that can they not tell, let's say the Catholic Church, that they must perform homosexual marriages? Because if they have the authority to determine that that their marriage is the same as as a regular marriage, I guess is the right thing, then they have the right to tell the churches and anybody else what to do in those regards.
And does that get into, and just from what you said then, let me ask, does that get into the practice of the religion?
Yeah.
And does it get into establishing whether or not blue is yellow?
Yeah.
I'm just asking. I'm not here saying that it has to be that way. Just asking, yeah.
Well, it's basically a principle. I mean, it's basically what's happened. I guess this government has got behind the religion of homosexuality. And if it's just a principle, it just switch the words and switch the names, what it entails, but not that any of us really care about homosexuality. But the fact of the matter is, I feel it's a violation of the First Amendment.
Okay. I'm not going to argue. Yeah, Judy.
And it's a violation of the Christian principles. If they can have their agenda, then under freedom of respecting other establishments of religion, then we as a Christians are being targeted, because we're considered hate crime among those now, and where we can't voice our free speech on what we feel or what we believe, because we've been isolated, and it's turned into hate crime.
I can't imagine anybody silencing you, Judy. I can't. But they can try. They can try, but it'll never happen. All right? Move on? Okay. So Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, so you can tell other people about it. And maybe you want to tell a lot of people about it, and that gets then into the freedom of the press. And that's the purpose of the freedom of the press, is so that you can express your values and express that blue is not yellow, if you want to say that. And then we get down to the next step, which is, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble. Because what happens if you broadcast, blue is not yellow? And there's a few people that are out there trying to stir it up and say, oh, yeah, got to get rid of the blues, no blues, you can't blues, da da da. And then Mel and I are dead. And Judy too, good Lord. So, what happens if you do that, then, and you let a lot of people know, then Judy may not have known about it, and she says, hey, this is something that shouldn't be this way, and she gets me and Mel all together, and we assemble. But you can't do that unless you have the press to let everybody know. So you let a lot of people know, so that then they can assemble. When they assemble, then they have the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So Congress shall make no law that prohibits peaceful assembly or that petitioning. Because I may have a problem with the fact that, blue is not yellow, and I want to go, and I think that things are going wrong, and I go up to the bureaucracy, and I say, hey, this is wrong, and so on. But I can get bounced around the halls of bureaucracy just because I'm one guy, but you get a whole assembly of us, especially with Judy. I'm not picking on you, I am sorry. No, it's true, I usually pick on Bruce, I know. So, but if we get an assembly together, they can't ignore us. And we can petition them for a redress of grievances, which is to say, to change things, to make them the way that we want them to be, or the way that we think they should be. So the purpose of the First Amendment is to keep the government under the control of the people. It's not just a grab bag that we have a little of this and a little of that. It's a river of rights that starts with you have the right to believe what you want, and that it flows all the way down to the point of, because of that, you keep the government under your control. Now, I know that some people complain that we got corporations that have captured the government, or we got unions that have captured the government, or we have the environmentalists that have captured the government, or we have the NRA, the National Rifle Association, has captured the government. The fact is, though, that every one of them has used the First Amendment to get a redress of grievances, and that's all that they're doing. Those people who complain about, oh, the corporations have it, or the environmentalists have it, or the NRA has it, or whatever, what they need to do is organize, peacefully assemble, and go there, have a petition for redress of grievances, and get the government back under your control. It's just that they play the game better than we do, and we just have to get better at playing the game.
At what point does peaceably assemble become a violent assembly, like Occupy, Wall Street Occupy movement?
Now that's an interesting question, because then that's actually a two-part question. The first is, how would you define violence, or how would you define peaceably, so that you know when peaceably ain't there? And so, I mean, I can suggest what I think it might be is the destruction of life or property. That would then no longer be peaceable. Just because you got people that are shouting loud, it can still be peaceable. But it's a two-part question. The first is, how do you define that? How do you define peaceable? And as you know, if you go to court, sometimes it's a crapshoot as to whether or not you're peaceable or not, or whether or not, what the decision is that you're going to make. And the second thing is, it depends on the government that's in power deciding whether or not they're going to enforce peaceable on you because they like what you're saying or they don't like what you're saying. Because the government actually should kind of be, should have a playing field that's the same for everybody, you know, instead of having, well, some people like Occupy Wall Street, well, it's okay for them to defecate on police cars. But if you get somebody at a tea party or something like that who drops a piece of paper and you arrest him, you know, that's bias, you know. Yeah, it's a real, if things get so biased that people start to fear their government, then we're in real trouble. And in fact, when the First Amendment starts to, when the First Amendment no longer works, it's because it's become so biased or whatever like that. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights does have a fail-safe, because the First Amendment is designed to keep the government under control of the people. However, if that fails, there is the Second Amendment. And the Second Amendment is the ultimate way that you keep the government under control.